Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing session for the day. So today's question is on environment and it is related to plastic waste. This can be categorized as a static question because plastic waste, electronic waste, land waste and so on, these are all basically the types of pollution which are plaguing the biosphere. Recently we have plastic waste management rules. They came up in 2016 and then we had amendments in 2018 and so on. So this question has been picked up from this particular theme. So we will, as usual, try and evolve the introduction, body, and the conclusion format for the question that has been given here. So I'll read out the question for you all, but before I do that, I'll give you all few prerequisites which are required when you handle an environment based question. One is the usage of acts. There are several acts which are related to environment. We have Wildlife Protection Act, we have Environment Protection Act, and then you have National Biodiversity Act, and then there are several rules on persistent organic pollutants, and you have rules on electronic waste, you have rules on plastic waste, and so on. So all these things can be mentioned in your answer, which will give good value addition to your answer. In addition to this, when you talk about environment, there are certain articles in the Constitution which are related to the environment. Some of them are in the fundamental duties, one of them is in fundamental duty, and another is in the DPSP. Keeping these articles in mind, it can become handy to write a good answer. So these will give you the requisite value addition. In addition to this, you have to use certain key terms like the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And you could also use diagrams of virtuous cycle, and these can be used to improve your visibility of the answer. So that being said, we have covered the prerequisites. Now I'll read out the question for you all. Plastic waste is a major environmental and a public health problem in India, particularly in the urban areas. Elucidate. So this is the first theme of the question. And the second thing it is asking me to talk about is the following. Can the Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016 help in addressing the problems related to plastic waste? So basically there are two themes in the question. One is that we have to show that plastic waste is both an environmental and public health concern. The second thing we need to show is how effective these rules and their effectiveness. This is the broad side heading that I have evolved. Now using these side headings, I could evolve several other sub side headings. Like for example, I'll mention the rules in a diagram and then I'll put the effectiveness in the subheading, and something like that can be done. The mix and match, the variation you want to give your answer is up to you. See, you've been following this program for quite some time. You know how to make these diagrams, you know how to create that uniqueness in your answer. So the side headings that you all have to broadly match the mandate of the question, but the way in which you order the side headings or the way in which you write them, like which of these side headings would be put as a diagram, which of these side headings would be addressed in point format, all that is up to you. So these are the broad side headings. Firstly, I have to talk about how plastic waste is a major environmental and public health problem, with focus on what? Urban areas. You have to keep this in mind. Having said that, I have to mention what these rules are briefly in a diagram, or I could directly mention them under a subheading, and then I'll move forward and talk about their effectiveness and the way in which we can improve their effectiveness. Immediately we will move to one or two line conclusion, which is neither too vague nor too dense. And then how do we introduce this answer? The way to introduce this answer is to start with a fact. If like for example, there are reports pointing out that by 2050 the amount of plastic which we have in the oceans will overcome the number of fish in the ocean. That is one way. And in 2014 there was a planning commission report which said most of the metropolitan cities in India were producing a huge amount of waste. And in addition to this, you have, if I remember right, a UNEP report which talked about plastic pollution and its sad effects on environment, people, and the animals. So any of these facts can be used to introduce your answer. And what are you doing by basically coming up with this fact? You're introducing to the examiner the gravity of the problem of plastic pollution. So that is the broad introduction, body, and conclusion format. Now we've evolved the skeleton of the answer, we will move forward and evaluate how the sample answer has been written. So let's just move forward and see how this has come up. This person starts with a fact. He has a report in hand. Planning Commission has reported that major metropolitan cities in India produce 15,000 tons of plastic waste per day. Okay, so this is a very difficult fact to remember. I don't know how this person has managed to remember this, but don't worry about it. Remembering 15,000 tons, remembering that the planning commission report which has come up in so and so year has given this metric, that part becomes really difficult. So don't worry about it. You can start with simple metrics. You can start with simple metrics such as plastic waste will overcome the number of fish in the sea. That is one way to introduce, and another way to introduce is to start off by talking about plastic waste and its negative impact on the environment as such. This might seem as a generic introduction, but that should do the trick for a 10 marker. Don't spend too much time trying to come up with a fact if you don't have a fact. So let's move forward and see what this person does. Major environmental and public health concern, that is what he's trying to establish. One is that it is non-biodegradable, so this cannot be degraded by microorganisms. It cannot be converted into simpler products like water and carbon dioxide or something like that. It cannot be done so easily by microorganisms. So what happens is these plastic waste will start persisting in the environment. Once it starts persisting in the environment for a long period of time, they get accumulated in the different parts of the ecosystem. Animals start eating it. There will be bioaccumulation, which he talked about, probably biomagnification, which he didn't mention, and then its consumption by animals, it is going to hurt them. So all these things he has written. In addition to this, he says that plastic waste basically clogs the sewerage and the drainage systems are really important in urban areas. He should have actually mentioned this point somewhere in the urban areas. He has mentioned a separate side heading for urban area, so he should have mentioned this point here. So this is basically an issue with prioritization of your points. If there are specific side headings in which you could put your points, put it there instead of putting them in generic points like this. That is one suggestion that I have. But it's not easy to do so in an exam scenario, because you can't basically dictate the way in which you recall the order of the points. सबसे पहले ये याद आ गया है and he has written it. So that seems to be the case, but then it's not easy to recall all the points in a prioritized manner, but one can only hope for it. But beyond some time, after some practice, you'll be able to do so. And then what else has he written? He says plastic pollution in the seas is hurting the marine ecosystem, fish, corals, etc. Now he has given me few points to talk about urban concerns. Let's see what they are. Incineration releases carbon dioxide gases, and then there are dioxins and so on. So there is basically whatever plastic gets incinerated, it is going to release a lot of harmful gases, and these harmful gases are going to hurt the ecosystem in more ways than one. In addition to this, what is going to happen? If you have the land, this is the soil, here you have the clouds, these clouds give you rain, and this rainwater doesn't get into the groundwater aquifer, because this plastic is basically clogging the surface. In addition, you also have the problem of concretization in the urban areas. So instead of going right down, this gets flown off as runoff and reaches areas like ocean, seas, and so on. So the groundwater seepage becomes a problem. So the groundwater doesn't get rejuvenated. The groundwater aquifers do not have time to get recuperated. So people will face a water problem. So that is what we have to keep in mind. And in addition, if you have plastic waste here and there, that is basically a very unpleasing situation. It is aesthetically unpleasing. So these are the points that he has written to establish how plastic waste is a major environmental and public health concern. I could think of a lot of other points, but and I want you all to write them down in the comment section. Environment, may think about them in terms of plants, think about them in terms of animals, think about them in terms of the ecosystem as such, and under each of these dimensions you will have 1 or 2 points. That is how you are supposed to evolve your points. And public health concerns, mein, how do you do it? You have to talk about their impact on children, because they are not really careful about what they eat, and you have to talk about the impact of bioaccumulation and biomagnification on various animals. and all these things can be written about. So it's easy to evolve your points once you have this accumulated web of knowledge. And how do you get this web of knowledge? It is basically through practice and revision. So this part has been addressed decently. Now we'll move forward and see what he has next. He's supposed to talk about plastic waste management rules, and he has done it. He's talking about the rules as such. Ban of plastic bags thinner than 50 microns. Okay. Local bodies have been made responsible for segregation and processing. This is interesting. This was basically one of the debatable points of this act. Local bodies have been made empowerable, ठीक है, made responsible, ठीक है, and what it means is that if these bodies are not able to handle the plastic waste, they are supposed to justify it. They are supposed to be accountable to the fact that they are not able to control the plastic pollution. But the sad part is, I mean, what the debate was that these bodies were not sufficiently empowered in terms of functions and functionaries in order to carry out these activities of plastic waste management rules. So implement करने के लिए they didn't have sufficient manpower, neither did they have the power. So what was the point of coming up with this act, coming up with these rules? So this was another debate. And in addition to this, you have extended producer's responsibility. From what I remember, extended producer responsibility came up in 2018. In 2016, it was only there in a nascent form. It was not explicitly remember. But if it is not the case, I want you all to put it down in the comment section. But this is a good point. Extended producer's responsibility is a good point. I want you all to explain what it is. It becomes really important for prelims. You have the concept of spot fines, and then you have rag pickers and kabaddi wallas. These people are the ones who don't have social security and so on. These are given some kind of introduction into the formal system through these rules. In addition to this, bulk generators. Who are these bulk generators? Like industries and so on, who basically use plastics in a lot, plastics in a in a huge magnitude. They are supposed to keep audits, and then yeah, they were supposed to promote waste to energy and so on. So he basically has given a lot of points under plastic waste management rules, and he has given me specific points instead of beating around the bush. So this is basically impressive. Let's see what he does. He's talking about effectiveness of the rules 2016. So here is the trick that I want you to remember. We have already written two subheadings. Now we are supposed to write about the effectiveness of the rules. If we started off with a subheading which says the problems, if we mention the problems in the rules, we are supposed to go with a way forward. अगर यहाँ पे if I start with the problems in the rules 2016, what I have to do is I have to end with a way forward, otherwise my answer becomes incomplete. So instead of doing that, he has put up a single side heading, keeping this space crunch in mind. So when you evolve your side heading, you also have to look at the space that you have left. Keep these things in mind. So he basically talked about both the problems in this act, in these rules that are there, and then he's also giving me the way forward. The rule should be complemented by value training and awareness. So this is a way forward. Promotion of alternatives like jute, etc., must be done simultaneously. This is another way forward. More than policy making, like coming up with these acts, we are also supposed to implement them. We were talking about local bodies, right? He also mentioned it here. The local bodies have been given responsibilities, यहाँ तक ठीक है, but then they were not given sufficient powers. If they are not given sufficient powers, how are they supposed to implement the rules? So he is talking about implementation of the rules. So these, he basically has given some generic points. This point on local bodies is a good point, and promotion of alternatives like jute seems to be a good point. But overall the answer is good. I say that because it is a content dense answer, and what I mean by that is that he has written too many points. He has written a good number of points which are difficult to recall in the exam scenario. When you ask a question in plastic waste management rules, all of a sudden from GS3, there are so many things you read before the exam, you can't evolve more than 3 or 4 points under plastic waste management rules. So he seems to have remembered a lot. So that part is visible. That kind of revision in his schedule is visible to me. So that part is impressive. So when you write your answer, if you write some facts and so on, that is going to give the impression to the examiner that you have spent some time in internalizing the concept, in digesting the concept. So whenever you read facts, it is important that you digest them, not all of them, but a good number of them, which would be relevant in your answer writing. And also what I would suggest you to do is have your syllabus. If this is a syllabus, like for example in GS1 you have art and culture, and then you have history, and so on. Under each of them you have a fact. Like for example, in GS3, if there is governance, I could have a fact like for example, pragati is a good governance model. So these facts become important. These could be my introductions, these could be my examples, these could be my conclusions. So overall, before you go to the exam, all you have to do is put this sheet in front of you, revise all the facts under each of the subheadings of the syllabus, and there you go. That should do the trick for your exam. So let's move to the conclusion. The rules, if implemented well, have the capacity to cleanse our ecosystem of plastic pollution. And in addition to this, you should have mentioned SDG, that is relevant here. You should have mentioned the article of the constitution, which is relevant here. So that is my review about this answer. This answer is an overall good answer. So even if he didn't write SDG and articles, it still looks good because he didn't deviate from the mandate of the question. And in fact, he had stayed too much within the mandate of the question. Without writing generic points, he mostly has written specific points. So I hope you have learned something from the discussion. I want you to make some short notes out of this discussion, keep it aside, and then revise it from time to time. That should be the discussion for the day. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.